Okay, I got my two favorite people here already. What else you need in life? All right. Okay, we just opened the doors. Come on in. This is going to be an earth-shattering event. All right. Abe, hey, as you come in, if you notice on the Zoom, there's two tools there. One is a chat box. Another one is the Q&A box. In the chat box, put what city you're in. If you want to, put your company name. The more we interact here, the more we get your questions and thoughts about this real topic about people that most of us are going through on some level, the more fun it's going to be, the more useful it's going to be to you. So if you can drop in, and we're between the three of us, the host here, we're going to monitor the chat box and the Q&A. So if there's something specific that you want to dive into, we'll do that together. And literally, we're going to launch. We're 1 minute after the hour. At 2 minutes into it, we're going to buckle up. We're going to get going. All right. Do you got Ramal and Sobeya? Do you know people in the chat box here, or the attendees?
Let me take a look. I actually haven't looked at the attendees list. Let's see. I don't see my folks in here yet.
You gotta get them. You gotta get your people on prepared and on time.
Yeah, I see that.
All right.
I've got.
What about you, Sobeya?
Let's see here.
Don't either.
Okay, so these are all my friends coming. That's good. Yep, Dallas Fort Worth, nice. I'm from Houston. Back almost 30 years ago, I left Texas to join the Army, and the Army left me in DC and did not give me enough bus money to get home. So I just stayed. I had to make a whole life out of this. Okay, so we're at time. Let's go. Let's kind of buckle up, get into it. Here we are, the people. So my name is Kirk. For those of you who don't know me, and I'm the CEO of Foresight CFO. I teach grad school at Georgetown University. I teach financial management of all things. And I'm delighted to have my friends from JP Morgan Chase, Ramal and Sobeya here. And you want to talk about get something done with the bank. I mean, if you're between revenue side from that 1 to 20 million, Sobeya is your point of contact. If you're 100 million plus, then Ramal can help you. And then if you're in between that, don't worry, contact either one. They got plenty of folks at JP Morgan who will help you out. And I will provide their contact information at the end in the slide deck. And that way, you can huddle to find out what Chase can do for you, because it's a smart move to proactively build relationships with bankers. They got access to money and they get a whole lot more. So as we get into this, we literally wrote the book about the future of CFOs for companies like yours. And Forbes is going to release our book on September the 27th. So just a couple weeks out. In the meantime, I'm going to drop in a moment. I'll drop a link to the Amazon into the chat box. If you want to pre-order the book, do so. I'm kind of guaranteed it's going to open up kind of new points of clarity, new opportunities for you. And instead of doing long introductions, we're going to, instead of putting our credentials out there, let's see what the value we have to say. Let's see if that carries the credentials for us. So to set the stage here, every day I have the pleasure of talking with CEOs nationwide, and it's a common theme. It used to be the common theme was, how do we win new customers, right? That was the big long pole in the tent. But I gotta say, in the last couple of years, it flipped, where now people is the long pole in the tent, and it's been some unusual things. I mean, just last year alone, 24 million people walked away from their jobs. I used to think people needed to work. They had bills to pay. I have bills to pay. I like to work, but I need to work too. But the great resignation, right? 24 million people walked away. And interestingly, it wasn't the same for every company. And even more interesting, it wasn't the same for every company in the same industry. I mean, MIT did a big research and it was different. I mean, people were walking away, but they do not like the company they're working for. So you get it even deeper. I mean, well, what does that mean? Do not like the company you're working for? Why? So another aspect of this, really in the last, 24 months or so, I mean, CEOs of these privately held businesses that we work with can't find enough people, or they can't find the right people. right? You got somebody in the seat, but it's like, man, we're more productive if they're not here. And literally a lot of CEOs, they're sitting on sales. I mean, it could be a record year on the top line revenue piece, but just can't deliver. So they got to, in some cases, pull back to have the capacity to do a good job still. So this is scarcity, right? So scarcity is here. And kind of to build this out here, I grew up in a household. My parents are really good people, right? My dad taught me since the earliest years. He taught me most people are basically good. Most people are basically good. And then I went out in the world thinking most people are basically good. And decades into building businesses, military service, and teaching grad school, I came to a different conclusion. I came to the conclusion that sometimes people suck, right? And most people don't have the drive, right? You see this. This is stuff you can't say at the bank. The bank has disclosures, but I don't. I'm not, right? I'm not regulated, right? Probably should be. So most people don't have the drive or the boldness that entrepreneurs have. I know my co-hosts, they do have the drive. That's why we're doing this together. So for privately owned businesses, it could be really hard to attract A players. We're not Google where people are coming in the door. It's a whole different event. Can you hear the sirens coming after me after that last comment? Right. So yeah, you know, 80-20. You know, it's that 20% of employees who are your best people. Get them, get more of them. Another factor going on is wage inflation. Wage inflation. If your employees aren't being paid more, I mean, food and energy costs are up there. I can see it. I can see it in my household, right? I mean, especially the food. My wife is a personal trainer, so everything has to be organic. I mean, right? But I'm sure there's a good reason for that. So, man, oh my God, wage increases. This is from a CFO standpoint, that's direct costs and overhead. What do you got to do in your business to make the math still work? It's tough. You definitely don't want your people to get behind, especially your A players, because they get behind, they get options. So for many businesses, labor is either the number one or number two cost. So it's big, right? Big. And so Betty was telling me this is not as new as I thought it was, but it's been in just the last few weeks, I've been hearing about this stuff like quiet quitting. And well, what's quiet quitting? I'm on social media way too much and arguing with people just for the fun of it. And quiet quitting is literally doing the minimal. Instead of wearing multiple hats, jumping in where you need your people to do their best work and being flexible, quiet quitting is just doing what's in their job description, doing the minimal, basically just enough not to get fired, right? Nothing extra.
Kirk, I think back in the 90s, I grew up in a blue collar home. I think we call those folks clock watchers.
Clock watchers, that's a good one. Coasting. Right?
Coasting.
If somebody's getting ready to leave, short timers, right? In the military, short timers, hey, 3 weeks you're out, or 6 months you're out. The whole motivation changes. So clock watchers, coasting, short timers. It's been around in one form or another for a while. Here's what's different is now these behaviors are being vigorously promoted and reinforced on social media as a virtue. Before, if you were a coaster, a clock watcher, you kind of knew, right? You may have had your reasons or whatever, but people kind of knew that, it's not the full roll up your sleeve, get it done team kind of stuff. But now it's being promoted as a virtue, like this is the right thing to do. Don't let your employer take advantage of you. And that's different. It brings it to a different culture element. And one thing feeds into another. So, I mean, what the heck is going on? This is Jackie Chan, for those of you who don't know. He's known for a little bit of action. What is going on? And, the X factor. So what is the X factor? The X factor is the variable in a given situation that could have the most impact on outcomes. That's what the X factor is. And for a lot of us, people are the X factor. When your people show up and they perform, it's going to be one outcome. If they do anything less than that, it's going to be varying degrees of a different outcome. So have you ever been surprised by a new hire where like, what happened? Everything looked good on paper, everything checked out through all the assessments and the culture index and different skill assessment and personality profile, everything looked good, but the person shows up and it's a dud, right? Just not going anywhere. So think about it. Let's kind of think about it. What is it like, the CEO of your business, right? And you have an A team, people you can trust. You got speed of trust, and they can literally start taking the weight off your shoulders, right? They plan, they follow through, they collaborate. Your business is cash flowing, the money's coming in faster than it's going out, which that helps people like me sleep quite well at night. Can you feel it? That's what we want. So let's get into in the next few minutes, we're going to lay out 3 key takeaways. We're going to talk about labor scarcity. We're going to talk about wage inflation. And we're going to talk about what CEOs should do. And this is where you come in. We're going to slow down a little bit more of a discussion, but we're going to start with the data. So Ramon and Sabaya, will you lay the groundwork? But before we do the groundwork, let's hear the bank's disclosures.
That's right. So before we get into the data, and most of this is going to be data, frankly, but we'll give some anecdotes. We'll give our opinions, and it's important to note that these are our opinions, not necessarily the opinions of J.P. Morgan Chase and Company. And I think that's really it, and we can jump right into the data.
So if there's something that my banking friends can't answer, I'll answer it. But there's nothing we can't talk about. So the data, let's get grounded here. Come on, hold on there. There's the button.
All right. So what we saw post the pandemic is a lot of hiring, which I think was a good thing. And in fact, jobless claims, and you can see this in this chart here from the St. Louis Fed's website, where jobless claims dropped to a low of 166,000 in March 2022. What we're seeing now with Fed rate hikes attempting to push back demand a little bit, and businesses starting to anticipate that we might be on the precipice of a recession, you're seeing jobless claims go up. And so initial jobless claims for September were 222,000. That resulted in the unemployment rate picking up from 3.5% to 3.7%. So you can see that we're moving in a different direction. This may, in fact, take pressure off of employers a little bit, but there is more to come on that front. We also thought about in our discussions, what's the impact of being unemployed versus underemployed? And there is the U6 measure, which measures people who are disengaged or part-time, employed part-time for economic reasons. So these are the underemployed people. When you add that into the 3.7%, what you get is 7.4% as of August 2022. Still a relatively still a relatively low number, but frankly, this is where, if you're trying to attract talent, this is where you're going to pick people off from other employers. So we can jump to the next slide.
Well, before we do that, to me, 3.7%, no matter how you stretch it, seems really, really low. There's no give in the market. What's healthy for us?
Yeah, this is a really good point, because if this were 1995, we'd say natural rate of unemployment is somewhere around 5%. You just can't get 100% of people working, because the jobs that are available and the people who are out there, the skill sets and the demand for the skills doesn't match with the skill sets that are out there. And of course, we saw ourselves get down to a 3.5% unemployment rate, right? And so, I think some people are scratching their heads going, well, what does that mean about the natural rate of unemployment? I agree, 3.7% is still very, very low. And when we get to the next few slides, in fact, the data gets a little bit more dramatic in terms of segments of the population, particularly skilled labor, what that unemployment rate looks like and what that looks like over time. And I think what this is saying to business owners and operators is that there is very steep competition. I'm sure nobody on the call is surprised by that. We've all seen that, right? I think the other side of the message, though, is that the competition for good talent will probably persist throughout time, even if we run into a recession. So 3.7% is very low. That number is probably going to continue to pick up. But we're going to see in the next few slides that it probably won't ever get to a point where there is going to be an oversupply of good, talented people in the market.
So you're saying that we won't get to that point where there's an oversupply?
I don't think so. And I should caveat this. I can't predict the future, right? But if you look at backwards looking data, skilled labor tends to have a fairly low unemployment rate. And attracting certain types of skilled labor. You touched on this in the opening comments. In certain sectors, attracting certain types of skilled labor, the competition just keeps on building up.
Yeah. Yeah. So Bay, what are you seeing with the customer? You're right there, those private companies, competitive growth, and they're not the Googles of the world. So what are you seeing?
Similarly, the wage inflation, the scarcity, a lot of entrepreneurs are just having to add more tools to their toolbox to attract talent. Some of them are going to staffing companies or executive search companies to do a lot of the work for them. The other thing is, focusing in on that last bullet as far as the underemployed people. There's a lot more questionnaires, surveys, really trying to make sure that you cover the touch and the trust part of being an entrepreneur with each employee to understand trajectory, right? And additional skill sets. I made it a point a few weeks ago, someone, I didn't realize it was unknown at work that I spoke, more than 2 languages. And, someone said, well, could you join me for a call? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I can, I'm Latin, so we tend to at least speak, minimum of three or more languages. So really understanding your employee profile on the front end, doing a lot of that work, because if every organization has underemployed people, I mean, I don't care who you are, there's always 1 or 2 things that each employee within a team does really well, but there's always more, so peeling back that onion, finding out, hey, how else can I properly utilize this person? I think that's huge, especially in small business, when there is a scarcity, when there is wage inflation, when market values are just increasing quicker than annual salary merit increases are. So I would really say that to the entrepreneurs, CEOs, HR people on the line. There's a lot of new tools. Mentimeter is one that I'm seeing a lot of my clients using to do their surveys. It's very affordable, but it's a good touch pulse check with your work staff that you can do easily every month, etc., whatever the cadence is within the specific business.
Yeah, so really tapping into those unknown skill sets that you already have with people who hopefully want to stay with you and do even more. And I speak 2 languages, by the way. It's English and Texan. Right? So are we in recession?
So are we in recession? So it depends on who you ask, I think. The Fed will say, well, GDP. So I think the typical way that most Americans have been taught to evaluate whether or not we're in recession is 2 consecutive quarters of contracting GDP. Now that's right, and that's what we all heard in our economics classes. And now that's not what the National Bureau of Economic Research does, who calls recessions. And I think we talked about this before, Kirk. But if you have contraction in the first quarter, expansion in the second quarter, contraction in the third quarter, expansion in the fourth quarter, and you look across that annual time frame, and what you have is contraction, then NBER would call that a recession. And so it's a little bit more tricky than that. And so what the Fed is doing right now is they evaluate what is currently kind of a hawkish stance on addressing higher than inflation than their target. They're also looking at GDI, gross domestic income, which measures the income of employees and corporations. Now, in theory, GDP and GDI should be the same, but the timing of when income is recognized and so on can make these 2 things diverge. You can see here in this chart across time, they are fairly similar. But right now, GDI in the second quarter of 2022 grew by 1.3%, and GDP contracted by 0.6%. Now, you can take from that data what you will. I think it does imply that we are seeing slower growth and moving into a contraction. I don't think there's anything surprising about that. I think the Fed's being a little bit more candid about a willingness to accept a potential contraction. And then other central banks are just saying right out, we've got to solve inflation. So outside of the United States, we've got to solve inflation. And the cost of that is an economic contraction. And that's just what it is. And so, again, these things may change the labor market dynamics such that wage inflation may start to slow down. The supply of labor in the market available may grow as jobless claims increase, or as that 24 million people who change jobs start to realize, like, well, it sounded really good 6 months ago, but this job isn't exactly what I wanted. Some of these things may soften the labor market a little bit and give employers an opportunity to go out and find good talent. But again, as we'll see in a second, good talent, as they used to say, good help is hard to find. And I think that is going to continue to be true.
Okay. So the definition has always included the employment and the wage factors, but people on the main street just didn't hear about it that way. It just so where are you coming down? Are we in a recession, or is it just some elements of a recession?
Yeah. So I guess I have a few responses to that. I don't know if we're in a recession. I won't try to call a recession. I think we can all appreciate that things are slowing down, right? The GDP, the 2 quarters of a contracting GDP definition is something that I think has been widely accepted. I think it's a reasonable way to define recession for the vast majority of people. And I think it's reasonable that most people, owners and operators of small businesses, have seen this contraction over the course of 2 quarters, have started to behave differently, have started to protect their balance sheets, have slowed down hiring and doing other things to protect the businesses. I think that's reasonable. I don't think that for business owners and operators, it's necessary to be paying attention to GDI or other data points that the Fed is looking at to make monetary policy decisions. I don't think that it's necessary to understand all that. What we've seen is GDP is contracted for 2 consecutive quarters. I think that's meaningful, and I think it's right for business owners to take that seriously and be prepared for what could be ahead.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense here. And then so let's drill down a layer deeper. What's going on with this? The whole topic is people. So what's going on, recession to labor?
Yeah. So as the market contracts, you'd expect that unemployment goes up. You'd expect there's opportunity to hire to the extent that your business warrants hiring. But this slide I thought was pretty interesting. These are college graduates, so people with a bachelor's degree who are 25 years and older. The blue line are the unemployment rate for women with a bachelor's degree or above, and the red line is the unemployment rate for men with a bachelor's degree or above, all 25 years old and older. So you do see these spikes during recessions, right? So you see a spike where unemployment picked up during the recession of 2008 for what I'm referring to here as skilled labor. And that reached a peak of 6.5% for men and 6% for women. But then it comes down consistently and precipitously, dropping to below 2% in 2018 through 2020. Then you see this big spike in 2020. No surprise there. We get some fiscal support, and you see this dramatic drop off, and again dropping down to about just below 2% for men and about 2% for women. This is interesting though, because if you do the same data for people with master's degrees, that number got as low as 0.8% for women and 1% for men.
Really?
It's uncanny, right? Like these numbers are uncanny. And so when I think about certain markets, to include places like Silicon Valley, to include Greater Washington, where we're all sitting, you have a large percentage of people who would be considered, by this definition, skilled labor. Now, when I think of skilled labor, I would also include people who have certain kinds of certificates. So if you're an electrician or whatnot, some specialized skill, right? That You don't necessarily have to have a bachelor's degree. When you think about this this population of people, there's a high concentration in certain areas. So Boston, Washington, D.C.,
Major metropolitan markets.
yeah, major metropolitan markets that attract this kind of labor. And there are businesses that are in those places because they want access to this skilled group of employees. Well, those businesses are probably going to find difficult to acquire and retain this talent. It's just not out there in an oversupply. And in fact, it looks like we just don't produce enough doctors, nurses, cybersecurity professionals, privacy professionals, software developers. We just haven't created enough of a pipeline in certain industries. And in those industries, there's going to be a war for talent for a long time, or at least it looks like there's going to be a war for talent for a long time. There are always exogenous factors that can change this dynamic, but it looks that way.
You know, Ramal, this is the first time I've seen the labor broken down that way. I'm actually an economist of all things from Hopkins, and I've never seen it broken down to skilled labor where you're looking at 1% for people with master's degrees, and that's something.
Yeah, and that number's picked up to over 2% right now, but just as recently as December, I think we were down to 1% for men and 0.8% for women, which, you know, in my head is impossible. It shouldn't be able to happen because there should always be some kind of disruption that causes people to leave one job and say, I'm going to take a break, and or businesses, you know, some businesses go out of business, some businesses get recreated, and those kind of things.
People move. I mean,
people move, right? But clearly, what we thought about the natural rate of unemployment before 25 years ago just doesn't hold today. And as people build specific skills, specialized knowledge, and businesses need that specialized knowledge, business owners and operators and managers and leaders are going to have to be very diligent about attracting and engaging and retaining that talent.
Like more than ever kind of stuff. So that takes us right into the main theme here, you know, scarcity, wage inflation, and then CEOs, what do we do? So let's kind of set this up and have a discussion where, you know, labor is scarce. It seems like the more skilled, you know, it could be that master plumber to the person with the master's degree, man, it's scarce. And so, you know, how many of you can't find the people you need, where you literally end up settling for something different, right? And I'm going to throw out that since COVID, values are changing. You know, things that we used to care about. I want to work that 80-hour week and go up the mountain. You know, people are rethinking what they care about. And even like in some of the research here, like more women want to be homemakers. Like I think it's up to 44% now, which is huge compared to where it's been. Some people, we're talking about employees, not just the CEOs here, but they want more time with their friends. They want more time with their families. They might want to work a 35-hour work week, like basically go Euro kind of stuff. More vacation, workforce flexibility, working virtually, right? And doing different things. Like one CEO I spoke with, you know, he wants to rebuild 1966 Mustangs like he used to do with his father. That's more important to him than working more and having more money. You know, what kind of stuff are you seeing? Like whether it's values, I mean, what are you seeing that's contributing to this scarcity of labor?
So I've got a response for that, but Sabia, I know you had some thoughts, so I didn't want to cut in before you shared some thoughts.
Sure. So just a couple things. I think from a social cultural norms, this probably started pre-pandemic. I think it's just been further exacerbated because it gave employees kind of like a new leg to stand on, hey, the hybrid working can work. We've been doing it for 2 years. So, you know, the flexibility is nice, but I do believe this all started this social cultural shift within workplace probably, I don't know, 10 years ago. Being a younger millennial, you know, there's core values that I look into as far as when I go to work for an employer. Whereas, if I have this conversation with my mom or my grandma, they're like, no, this is a job
Yeah.
and your responsibility is to do XXX at a high level. And when we have these conversations, for me, it's, yeah, of course, but I want to do XXX at a high level for an organization that does this on a community level, that offers me X benefits, that gives me flexibility. So I think it's important to read the room, right? Read the environment we're in. Social cultural norms, they're constantly changing, and there's a slight difference, if not a big difference, between generational workforces as far as what we're looking for.
Yeah. Let's
I
go with big difference.
well, I was trying to be conservative, but I have a sister who's 26 and is Gen Z, and I'm millennial, and we're aligned on certain things, but then I have to say some of her expectations exceed my expectations. So I think it's important when you're doing your talent search to keep these social cultural norms kind of in mind, as well as what the data is showing you, because if there is scarcity, you're not necessarily going to get 100% of everything in one candidate. And quite candidly, most times you don't get everything you want in one candidate. Sometimes you have to groom that, or build that person up.
Yeah.
So I would say that would be the key thing. I think the other thing, as far as things to consider within a scarcity, a labor market that has scarcity, is value system and culture, which ties into social cultural norms. I think it's important to understand or to be able to communicate that to each employee, so they become internal stakeholders of the company, and that should help reduce attrition. As far as people leaving, if you can get that type of buy-in where your people feel like they are internal stakeholders.
Yeah, those are huge, right? I mean, baby boomers are retiring. They're aging out in all positions, so that increasingly millennials and Z are coming in to take those foundation seats, and everybody else is kind of moving around. So, Ramon, what about you? What do you see? I mean, what's driving scarcity? And we'll get to the solutions in the back end on the third key takeaway.
Yeah, so if you think about it, if you're hiring a 30-year-old, right, an adult who might own a home, who might be married, who might have kids, that 30-year-old has never actually seen a real recession. So when I say that, what I mean is 2020, we went into recession as a function of lockdowns associated with COVID, and we created a ton of stimulus to stave off some of the negative effects of a true recession. And so you'd have to look back to 2008, 14 years ago, I guess 13 years ago, we would have come out of it for a true recession. And that 30-year-old would have been somewhere around 17 in high school, right? So that 30-year-old would have never worked in an environment where you had a real recession, where people were really literally being laid off, and there's this slow return. In that time period, you've had a consistently dovish Fed who's been more focused on growth and has taken interest rates down to zero, right? And I think that, coupled with a declining labor force participation rate, for that group of people, really changed what their expectations were. So they didn't have to, it wasn't real to them to be laid off because the macro environment was unfavorable, right?
Yeah.
What was real is there was a dovish Fed that promoted growth, businesses that were looking for talent, looking for a lot of young talent, anticipating that baby boomers would be retiring in the next decade, and they want to groom young talent. So you have so you're very attractive when you're coming out of college. In your mind, recessions just don't happen because you went for a decade and you didn't see one.
Yeah.
And when you did run into one, there was so much stimulus that it may not have affected you at all. The only thing that really had an impact was being asked to work from home. But this is a group of people who were likely to have been so technologically savvy that working from home was not a burden, but instead,
It was empowering.
an accommodation, right? That's right. It was empowering, right? So, so when you talk about the psychology generationally of different people, well, there's a whole swath of employees who are working adults, who are professionals with skills, who just haven't experienced the things that prior generations have experienced. They at least haven't experienced it yet.
Yeah.
And you add in that the labor force participation rate has been precipitously dropping for 20 some odd years, I think, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
And of course, the pandemic caused the labor force participation rate to drop and come back, but we're still below the pre-pandemic level. And in that data, we have a smaller labor force because we lost a lot of people, some of whom were a part of the labor force. So the psychology is different for these reasons that existed over a long period of time since the last recession. And I also think the psychology is different because people looked up and some people lost loved ones, or some people saw loved ones go into the hospital for a long period of time, or they themselves went into the hospital for a long period of time, and they thought to themselves, wow, I just didn't imagine something like this could happen.
Yeah.
What does that mean for how I allocate my time? Now, I think gradually we're starting to come back to the idea that we still get value from work. We get our identities there, we build relationships there, we make money there, we create value for the communities that we serve there.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of these things were building over time, and the pandemic was kind of a crescendo. And what we're dealing with is how do we organize ourselves around working, given what I just described, particularly with the generation of people who I just said, you know, if you're 32 and under, you're probably in that group.
Yeah, those are really good points. There's a real shift here, and there's some level of permanency with lots of it, generational and COVID accelerated. Hey, another key factor is our K through 12 investment in public schools is not producing skilled labor. So to a large extent, it's producing a lot of disengaged folks who might be literate, maybe, right, if we're lucky.
Right.
In some cases, colleges aren't producing graduates who are skilled and ready to work from an attitude kind of standpoint. And I teach kind of for fun at Georgetown University grad school, and it's the education model is like 400 years old for these institutions, and then public schools, and it's an industrial model. And as far as I can tell, we left the industrial model a long time ago. So when are we going to start getting, education version 2.0 that's developing people who are ready and excited about that part of their life and go out and do something useful?
That's an interesting point. I went back to school a couple years ago to get my second master's. And one of the things I realized is the way that business was being taught in business school was really different. When I went to school, it was focusing on core competencies and on brokerage, investment, econ, marketing. And going back this time, even though I was still doing a very black and white topic as far as accounting and economics, there was actually a HR requirement. There was actually a psychology class requirement.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting. As a finance person, it's a people business, right? All I do is speak with new people. If I don't speak with at least, 7 new people a day, then something's wrong. Then, by the end of the week, I'm stressing about, my engagement. But I think that's a interesting point that you're bringing up. I call it the touch and trust, building that, and making sure that that if you do get a candidate, right, and they don't have that, well, then their development plan should include, how do I build this professional up?
Yeah. That's good on that third key points on how do we make up for these gaps here. Immigration policy, right, is not long overdue for version 2.0. Some administrations, political ones have tried, some haven't tried, but either way, I don't know if it's 50 years out of date, but it just doesn't match the needs. I mean, whether it's merit based or some other basis, the numbers, skilled and unskilled. I think that's a major area we're just, as a country, we are just wrapped around the axle for really no good reason other than not doing the work to get a better outcome. I mean, Ramon, I'm not sure, are you seeing things on the economic side of it, any of this?
I don't have any data on it, but anecdotally, I think it is a good observation, right? We've got some great colleges here in the United States, and we've attracted for decades international talent to come to those colleges. And for decades, a lot of that international talent remain in the United States, and we were the beneficiaries of people like the founders of Google, right? At this juncture, it seems that more of that international talent that's coming here to go to our universities is going back overseas to build businesses. Now, businesses are also global these days, and there are still ways that domestically we can benefit from those businesses. But I think it does highlight this point that you're making, that there is talent globally that we've historically been able to attract to fill in for the talent gaps that we have. And some of that talent's going back to home countries to build out businesses there. And so I think, to your point, we've got to figure out how to continue to attract good talent to continue to build business here. The other thing that I came across the other day is this idea that businesses here, we've done a very good job of creating demand for the services that we offer. But at this point, the production capacity hasn't kept up. And that hasn't been an issue historically, and it just speaks to how effectively we've learned to communicate with our stakeholders, primarily our clients, and how quickly and flexible our economy is in doing that. And really, the whole is that we've got to figure out how to continue to attract and retain the talent.
Yeah. That's really good. And before we step into the wage inflation, when we're doing the research and having discussions for this Bold Moves webinar, we came across Malcolm Gladwell. You might know him, the Tipping Point, 10,000 hour guy, and he has a great case study where he talks about athletic teams are some of the most efficient at recruiting and developing talent, most efficient organizations in our country. And you think about it, they got people watching kids in middle school playing different sports. And according to him, his measurements and his research, we're only tapping 16% of that talent, right? And so imagine the rest of us in the corporate world, if we don't have anything like that as far as the capability. So what sources of talent are we missing? And we're gonna hit this on the third key point about what CEOs can do. And since labor is scarce, how do CEOs help employees increase productivity? So let's use this to take the next step on key point number 2, wage inflation, right? More research, according to the Economic Policy Institute, year-over-year wages increase for private companies, not the public companies, but private companies, it's 5.2%, right? And that's below the inflation that was what was it, 6.5%, 7%, something like that in the last 12 months. And so that's going to create pressure. I mean, if we don't proactively address it as CEOs in our companies, our A players are sitting there and they can't afford groceries like they used to. They're getting squeezed somewhere. So what are your thoughts, either of you, like wage inflation? What are you seeing?
As far as wage inflation, and I think Ramal, we talked about this a little bit before as we were gathering our data for this presentation. It has to do a lot with the market value of skilled labor and how quickly candidates, professionals can build that up. And how does that compare to annual increases or starting points? I've had this conversation, and I use my sister a lot as an example because she's 26 and she's still figuring it out, right? So I'm her 911 call.
I'm still figuring it out.
Well, it's funny because she thinks I have a lot of the answers, so anywho, I use her as a default for a lot of these subjects, but
Yeah.
she received her first offer, and she graduated college just 4 years ago, so she's 25. And she decided to do like 1 year of just traveling abroad and whatnot, which apparently is the thing to do, the leap year they call it now. So instead of 4 years, school was actually 5 years because of this new phenomenon of the leap year, cultural again. um, but she received her first offer. She went with it. She said, I just want a job. And I thought, okay, well, that's a pretty pragmatic approach. Get your foot in the door, see what you like, gauge, if this is the career path or the company for you.
Yeah.
Well, fast forward a couple years now, it's very different. She's like, well, sister Sobeya, I have 3 offers, and they're each offering me, between 15 to 25%. So what that shows, just using her as an example, someone with limited experience, well, I won't say limited, but let's just say, 4 years
Thanksgiving's coming
experience.
up. Thanksgiving's coming up soon, so be careful. Yeah.
But just using her as an example, 4 years of experience in industry, 25% increase, that's pretty decent compared to the 3%. I think the highest annual increases we saw we saw some in 2019 go up above 3%. Ramal, correct me if I'm wrong, please. And then we saw some of that in 2021. But yeah, so she's going to jump ship, obviously, because she's following the money, right? My conversations with her are more, okay, but how many times can you realistically do this, right? How many times is this really going to benefit your salary? Because you're gonna come to a point where that's it. You're going to reach the maximum level of market value for what you do. So I think for CEOs and HR people, it's making sure that you're looking at those pay grades. One thing, here, it's easier for a big institution like us because we have all the data and we're tracking this. We're making sure that our pay grades are, comparable to what the market is offering for specific professionals. So I think keep that up. I'm also seeing a lot of clients coming to me asking for increases in lines of credit for expansion loans as they're trying to not use their liquidity that they've built up,
Yep.
some through the pandemic and some through just operationally, but also, hey, we know we've got to hire 5 people. We're going to have to pay them at least 100,000 in this market. Half of that is going to come from the company, but the other half, we want you guys to finance, our intellectual capital investment. So I'm seeing a lot of that, which is interesting because a lot of the balance sheets I'm looking at in my space, the 1 to 20 million space, they look pretty healthy. We did a lot of good work with the stimulus that was provided, PPP 1, PPP round 2. A lot of clients also took on additional EDIL funds while also managing to be productive. So I think that's interesting when clients are still coming to the bank to fund some of that growth
Yeah.
or wage inflation.
Okay, so there's at least three things going on, right? You got overall people are not keeping up with inflation, which is going to create pressure. So it's an opportunity to get ahead of that. Then there's other people like your sister who are making the moves and they're getting, they're beating inflation significantly. And then there's wage compression, and this is where you bring in a new employee and you're paying the new employee more than your current employees. That's not a good dynamic, right? And so with this whole environment, you got scarcity, you got wage inflation, and there's a need for greater productivity, right? So that you can still stay competitive and have a healthy bottom line and gain all the financial freedom you're looking for. So let's jump into here. We're gonna come in for a land in just a moment on the key point number 3. What should CEOs do? And this is, I'm gonna give my quick commentary about my impression, 30 years of building businesses. My impression of HR professionals is, man, I've been disappointed with HR professionals. Traditional HR professionals disappoint me. Many sound like paralegals. Can't do this, can't do that, can't fill this out, fill that form out. What is that? And compliance is important. That's backstage stuff. That's stuff you do in your sleep. It's not a big event. But where's the front stage stuff where HR professionals are talent maximizers, right? They're all over
Mhm.
these kinds of solutions, these kinds of pieces of the puzzle to do even better. So, this, I won't keep going now. I'll leave that alone. And so what are HR professionals do to help people bond? People bond, real authentic people bond as a true team to do something remarkable together. In many cases, HR they lost their way. They've been scared by the lawyers. So let's do better than that, right? So what would it be like if your company is the employer of choice? People might be resigning from other companies, but they're looking for you. They want to work for you. At 80-20, the Pareto rule, that top 20% of the talent that's out there, you get your choice, right? What would it be like if you got that discretionary effort? They're not doing that quiet quitting, minimal coasting stuff, but they really going above and beyond. Because a lot of people still want to do something remarkable. They want to make their day count. Yes, they want to be paid well, but they want more than that, right? And what if your employees love what they're doing? They're in the right seat. They're able to speak up and drive outcomes, the kind of outcomes that you want, right? This is what CEOs, key point number 3, this is what CEOs should be doing. Get intentional about employees doing well by doing good. It's not a secondary thought. It's not a byproduct. Get real intentional about employees doing well by doing good. Be bold. Blow up conventional restraints. Most of it is just BS, and it's going to lead to lawsuits because it's too artificial. People feel betrayed when it's artificial, right? Get ahead of talent who can also do compliance, backstage, but somebody who's more than that, right? Become the employer of choice. So involve your employees in the journey. I mean, we created internal masterminds where every month employees meet peer to peer to work on different things, solve problems, make sure we're living up to our values. Given that the scarcity and wage inflation drives the need to increase productivity, what can you do? Right? Can employees be more focused on what really matters versus the noise? Automation, robots, artificial intelligence, using technology to achieve strong follow through. You make a decision, how strong is the follow through on your company? That's a stall point for a lot of companies.
Mhm.
So, and then stepping back in the growth CFO world, hey man, wages are going up. Direct costs, overhead, supplies are going up too, by the way, for a lot of folks.
Mhm.
So your business model, how's your pricing? Right? Are you value pricing or are you doing something else? Are you leaving money on the table? What's your business model? How do you make money? Is it tuned up to the world that we're in right now and the world that we're going into, right? And that becomes the macro to make really good decisions about your people so that they're doing well. They stay with you. They want their great grandchildren to work with you. That's how good you are, right? So what do you all are seeing? I mean, what should CEOs do?
So Kirk, I think Gallup and WorkHuman did a survey, and I was a little bit surprised by this. But one of the things they talked about was employee recognition. I was trying to figure out what exactly that meant, but recognizing accomplishments, promotions, things like that, increases engagement, and as employees feel more engaged, they are likely to perform better, be more productive, stay longer. And internal mobility seems to be another one that came up in some of the research. I think
Oh, is that right?
employees who are internally mobile stayed at their jobs for about 5.5 years versus those who were not stayed at their jobs about 2.9 years or something like that, if I recall correctly. It's interesting. I don't envy any of the CEOs that have to deal with some of these things daily. Wage compression is a big problem, I think, and you can't always offer somebody a 25% increase to keep them. It
Especially
doesn't
for
always
small
make
businesses.
sense, right? It's a tough balancing act, and I'd love to hear from folks in the chat room to give their perspectives, as I know some of the folks who I know are in there, and I know personally that they've dealt with some of these things. If they're comfortable, just kind of offering perspective. But yeah, these are very nuanced issues that frankly change over time, because today wage inflation is 5%, but that could change tremendously in 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, you have the numbers. If you recognize an employee, I'm not quite sure what that means, but it's worth figuring it out. I mean, here's the research you gave me: 4 times more likely to be engaged, 56% less likely to be looking for another job,
Yep.
4 times likely to feel like they belong here, right? And so those are huge things. So you talked about retaining, and I'm stepping on the gas a little bit because we're on land here. Retaining, developing, and identifying the talent, and doing it very intentionally, and that's where, just emphasizing your numbers. On average, employees stay 2.9 years, but if you develop them, like in this picture here, you're developing their muscles, the almost double, 5.4 years.
Yep.
So whatever investment there is in recruiting and developing them, you're going to get the longevity and their expertise, because expertise does matter. That's huge. Doubling the time, average time for the employees you want to keep.
That's right. That's right.
Right. And then let's go to identifying. Subay, you talked a lot about this with the mentoring, sponsorships and mentoring. Is there anything else you want to add here before we land?
Not particularly. I mean, I call it the 3 T's, establishing trust, touch with your employees, right? Getting to know them, getting to know proper skill set levels. And when you establish trust, most companies do it with clients, but obviously it has to be done internally also with associates, and building that same touch and trust with both. And then also technology. I think that's a big thing, being able to properly empower your workforce with the right tools to do the job. That's also one of the things I see in a lot of surveys where people leave, where maybe it's a great company, but they just don't have the right tools to get the job done the right way, or within an efficiency, at an efficiency level, is what I would say.
Yeah,
But I'm super curious to see if we can hear from some of our CEOs out here.
let's see if anybody wants to pop up. If you got a question or comment, put it into the box and we'll hit it. Can somebody paraphrase that question there?
So Harley Flack here says, wage inflation is not only affecting skilled and unskilled labor, it is also changing the way business is working, with unions and organizations representing the labor force. These discussions are becoming more complex between clients, subcontractors, and government organizations. I think he's spot on, and Harley is the CEO of a contractor in Maryland. And so he's speaking from experience, and I'm sure kind of referencing things that he's dealing with in real time.
Well, I haven't dealt with labor unions in a long time since doing Port Authority work. So great comment. And let's kind of bring it in. It's valuable because for most of us, the people are a huge factor to what you're doing, how well you're doing it with your clients, so that your clients are raving fans. It's valuable. I mean, you're taking the weight off your shoulders, your cash flowing better. Your business is actually, based on John Worrell's research of 34,000 private companies, on average, if you're doing these type of things well, on average, you're 71% more valuable. So you get that second payday. You get more household income today, but also your second payday when you transfer the business. So usually useful. And I'm going to bring us in here for landing. I'm going to put the contact information up here. So this, I mean, if you haven't got the same sense that I got, Ramal and Subay are great people to work with. So this is your opportunity to start a relationship with them, and build a relationship is one of the bold moves where you proactively gain access, proactively gain insights on what you can do better in your business. So I encourage you, we'll send out the slides. I encourage you to have a discussion, at least get on the flight line to figure out what could be beneficial. And likewise, if you want to learn more about what the future of CFOs, the growth CFO 3-person team can do to help you do even better, I'm gonna drop the there's a chat box here. I'm gonna drop the link to my calendar into a chat box. If you get on that, or it's on the website as well, then we'll do this discovery call, find out kind of where you're trying to get to, and what are the kinks in the hose keeping you from getting there. And are there any other questions before we wrap up? We're at the hour, and I'd like to land on
Kirk.
time.
I do
JW
see
Oliver
another
asked a
question.
question.
Yep, you want to throw it out?
So JW Oliver says, our industry has seen a large move to offshore teams with UK as a primary language, Zimworks.com in Zimbabwe. Any thoughts?
Okay, say it one more time.
Our industry is seeing a large move to offshore teams with UK as a primary language, Zimworks.com in Zimbabwe. Any thoughts? I'm not sure that I fully understand the question, but I think this idea around the fact that folks who, due to the unavailability of educated labor, that makes a lot of sense.
Ah, okay.
Look, again, a difficult time attracting the skilled labor to the United States. Start sending the jobs to places that frankly have the skills, but don't necessarily have the cost structure that we might have in the United States. And I think this is a problem. And I think technology has exacerbated the problem. And I'm not sure how we reconcile that with, well, it's a problem for employees and employers. I'm not sure how we reconcile that, how we get those people. Sometimes you want them onshore. I'm not sure how we solve that. Sometimes you don't want them onshore if the cost structure is less if you employ them in another country, but you do run into timing issues, technology issues, and so on, and at times communication issues.
Well, I go as far as we're going to land here. If people got to drop, it's understandable. It's an opportunity because being able to tap talent globally is a big benefit, right? Literally getting the exact right person, no matter where they are, as long as they have internet access and a computer. That's a huge competitive advantage. There's different management skills, right, to make that happen. We've all got a taste of it with COVID when most businesses virtualize at least on some level. We do that. We got 35 people globally. It doesn't matter where they sit. We get the best talent, which is roughly out of 17 people, one person qualifies. So, and it all depends if you want people in the U.S. versus something else. So it's both our options. Evaluate them with the numbers and what kind of business you want to be.
There's no shortage of talent in the world. I think it's the statement, right? I think from a company perspective, it's just making sure that cultural work values align. For example, time working when I worked in Italy, the day ended a little bit earlier than it would in New York, for example, or here in a major metropolitan area. So just assessing things like that and just nuances that go with outsourcing labor.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring this to a close where we don't normally run over, but this is a good topic. We'll send out the recording, the slide deck, and I encourage you to have a discussion about your business with any of the people that are hosting on the panel right now. But thank you for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. We hope that you got a few things that are helpful to you to think about the next steps with even more clarity. And we'll see you at the next monthly Bold Moves webinar.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Hasta luego.